January sun was already blazing from early morning. I stretched. It was going to be an ordinary day, no different from hundreds of other scorching days in the Australian outback. At least that's what I thought. It was cool inside the house, and I really didn't feel like stepping out into Leonora's generous sun. The recent Christmas holidays had faded, and the festive hustle and bustle quickly gave way to a sleepy summer haze. Not much ever happened in Leonora. As a constable, I knew every one of the 600 residents of this town, their habits and petty squabbles. My job mostly involved sorting out domestic disputes, finding runaway dogs, writing up a couple of speeding tickets on the highway, or checking if any of the miners had dozed off at the bar after one too many tinnies. No big cases, just routine, and not even every day. And though it was frankly boring at times, I was glad our little town was peaceful and quiet. The kids were on school holidays. For many Aussies, this time meant a break. And despite the scorching heat, the tourist season was in full swing. People from all over the states trekked here in their caravans and campers. They drove along the Golden Pipeline, bypassing Coolgardie and Menzies, heading north towards Leonora, sure to stop by the ghost town of Gwalia. As usual, I dropped by the food van shop on Tower Street. The cafe opens at 6 in the morning, so anyone craving a delicious breakfast can pop in before work and enjoy Fiona's homemade pastries, the best in the entire district. Today, I grabbed her signature meat pie, made to her own recipe. I drank my aromatic coffee and headed to the station. The station greeted me with silence. I was alone. My partner, Harry, had taken off with his family to the coast to enjoy a well-deserved holiday. My boss, Sergeant Brown, was on a district trip to Kalgoorlie, leaving me in charge. So, for the next few days, I was the only copper in Leonora. I switched on the computer, wondering how to occupy myself on this sleepy day. The phone rang suddenly, like a predator bursting into my cozy world. Leonora Police, Constable Murdock.
Jimmy, it's Mary White. Oh God, Jimmy, it's a nightmare. You have to come immediately.
Mary's voice, one of the museum caretakers in Gwalia, was distorted with panic.
We found a body. Oh my God, it's right there in one of the miners' huts. It's terrible.
A body? In Gwalia, in a miner's hut? Had they overheated in the morning sun? My brain refused to believe it. All right, Mary, don't panic. I'm on my way. I jumped into the patrol car. Everything felt absurd. Here, in our backwater, maybe one of the tourists had a heart attack or got bitten by a snake. A few minutes later, I was on site, in the ghost town. Gwalia, a ghost town a couple of kilometers south of Leonora. A former mining settlement that died out after the old mine closed in '63. All that remained were dozens of dilapidated structures where workers once lived and toiled. Huts, kitchens, laundries, sheds, charred workshops. Everything was frozen here, as if people had gone out for lunch and never returned. Dishes on tables, mattresses on wire bunks, kerosene lamps hanging on nails. Everything has stood just as it was since the last century. Now it's an open-air museum. Nobody guards anything, entry is free. Nearby there's a free 72-hour parking area. Caravanners and tourists stop here for a day or two to explore the settlement. It's an atmospheric spot, great for snapping a few pics against the rusty tanks or the rusted-out mine headframe. I knew every building here almost as well as I knew those in Leonora proper. A small group of tourists, about 6 or 7 of them, stood near one of the huts. They were loudly discussing the incident. It all looked like an unexpected twist in their Goldfields tour. You could sense the excitement and shock from their unforeseen discovery. Their adventure had certainly paid off. Mary White, the museum caretaker, stood with a phone in her hand, visibly nervous. As soon as I approached, she immediately spoke.
Jimmy, inside, on the floor. The tourists found him. One of the guys first thought it was a mannequin, and then a scream. I called you right away.
I nodded. I glanced at the hut. There were dozens like it here. Plywood walls, corrugated iron roofs, a narrow door with a sign, Miners' Residence, 1934. I stepped inside. The air inside smelled of dust, wood, and something else, metallic, sour. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the walls, painting stripes of light on the floor, intersected by shadows from cobwebs. He lay on his back, right on the wooden planks, arms outstretched, legs slightly bent, as if he'd fallen suddenly and hadn't had time to brace himself. Blood was caked under his neck, a dark stain soaked into the wood, black against grey. His throat was savagely cut, not a clean shave of a cut like in movies. The wound was wide open, jagged, with frayed edges, but most striking was his skin. Not just pale, porcelain, without a hint of pigment, like chalk. So white that in the patches of light it appeared bluish. He was a complete albino. His hair thin, almost transparent, like fiberglass. His eyebrows were barely discernible, his lips bloodless, and his eyes dilated pupils, a glazed stare. The sclera was cloudy, but with a pinkish tint, as is common in people with severe forms of albinism. Yet, his eyelashes were long, bushy, and framed his eyes like silver velvet, shimmering slightly in the dim light. They seemed too bright and at the same time unnatural, as if reflecting moonlight that hadn't been here in ages. I didn't immediately realize I'd frozen. I wasn't breathing, I just stood and stared. My brain latched onto details. A broken button on his shirt, the worn sole of a boot, a strip of dust on his hair. I took a step back. The air in the hut grew heavier. Outside, someone's loud laughter erupted. Sharp, alien, out of place. It jolted me out of my stupor, like someone had clapped their hands next to my ear. I shook my head. Right, Jimmy? Pull yourself together. In crime shows, the first thing they always do is cordon off the scene. No unauthorized personnel. I stepped out decisively. One big kid was already filming a TikTok reel as if he'd found not a dead person, but a prop for an escape room. "Stop filming," I snapped. My voice sounded unexpectedly sharp even to myself. "All right, the show's over. This is a crime scene. Step away from the building immediately." Everyone froze, as if only just realizing where they were. "I have a request for you," I continued, calmer now. "Please return to your campus. No one is to leave. I'll need to speak with all of you to take your statements. Please, stay on the campground." I took a couple of steps forward, not because I needed to, but just to appear confident. In reality, everything inside me was tightening. I had no idea what to do next. But at least this. Start with the obvious. Get rid of the extras. Make it look like I knew what I was doing. The tourists, clearly disappointed, reluctantly moved towards their caravans. I turned to Mary. "Make sure not a single person is on the Gwalia grounds. See to it that the holiday makers aren't wandering all over the place. They'll stomp all over the evidence for Chuck's sake." I was left alone. Thoughts raced through my head. What next? Call an ambulance? Yes, but a bit later. I need to secure the evidence first. Call Kalgoorlie to send a forensic team? And then it hit me. The fire brigade. Leonora has a volunteer fire service. These guys are trained, they know how to act in emergencies. I quickly described the situation to the dispatcher and asked for someone to come help. While waiting, I started taking photos and videos. Every small detail could be important. I knew my knowledge was critically lacking. I was already typing the number for the gold stealing detection unit into the search, a special police unit in Kalgoorlie that handles criminal investigations in the district. Kalgoorlie responded. Specialists would fly in by helicopter. They asked me to secure the crime scene. Holidaymakers should leave the museum, and staff should remain on site so as not to interfere with the investigation. I was proud of myself that I had already taken all these prescribed actions. Meanwhile, the fireys arrived. They quickly cordoned off the perimeter, set up warning tape, and made sure no one crossed the line. A few meters from the museum, a real festival was underway. At the campground, tourists were grilling meat, drinking beer, laughing and making a ruckus all over the area, enjoying their holiday. I headed towards this celebration of life to take their statements. I recorded their driver's licenses, entered everyone into the database as witnesses, and dictated their version of the body's discovery onto a voice recorder. About an hour later, we heard the hum of a helicopter long before it appeared in sight. I looked up. The iron dragonfly hovered in the sky, made a wide circle, and began to descend. Dust rose in a pillar, dry, warm, unpleasant. The landing was neatly arranged, right on a bare patch behind the museum. The tourists quieted down. Even the meat on the grill seemed to stop sizzling. Two figures emerged from the helicopter. One was in a dark uniform with a detective sergeant patch, the other in jeans, a vest marked WA Forensics and sunglasses. Each carried a heavy case, like surgeons arriving for an emergency operation. "Officer James Murdock?" The one in uniform addressed me. "Yes, sir. Detective Sergeant McLean, Kalgoorlie. This is forensic investigator Ray Hart." We shook hands. McLean looked me over assessingly, almost expressionless. "Who found the body?" "Tourists. I've got all their details recorded." "Time?" "Around 8 this morning." "Identity established?" "No, he's not local. No documents on him." McLean nodded briefly. "Where's the body?" "Inside, in the hut." I gestured towards the miner's shack. He headed there without another word. Hart stopped at the entrance, set his case on the ground, and began laying out evidence bags, plastic containers, and a tarp. Everything moved quickly and precisely. "Are there any unauthorized personnel on site?" he asked, not looking up. "Tourists at the campground, staff at their workstations. The fire brigade is helping keep order," I replied. "Good work, James. Keep securing the area." That sounded like bugger off. I stepped back to a charred pole, shoved my hands in my pockets, as if my part was already played. I wanted to say something, didn't even know what, and then changed my mind. The helicopter hummed somewhere behind me. The dust hadn't settled yet, and in my chest a sticky, unpleasant mix of shame, resentment, and helplessness was rising.
"Don't worry about it, Jimmy,"
a voice said from the side. I turned. It was Kevin Rowley, our veteran, an old man with a face like cracked brick and eyes like something out of an old movie, where everything had already happened long ago. He stood in the shade, leaning on a shovel.
"These city slickers are all the same. Think they know everything. Think just because they've got a logo baseball cap on, they're running the world. But they're useless. They'll cluck around and then disappear,"
the old fireman said with a merry squint. I turned to him. "Kevin, what are you talking about?"
"About 40 years ago, I was a young bloke like you then. They found another albino in the Sons of Gwalia gold mine quarry, also with his throat cut. And also, no one knew who he was, where he was from. Kalgoorlie flew in back then, poked around, and vanished. The case went cold. The body was taken away. That was it."
He spat into the dust. It was like I'd been struck by lightning. "Wait, are you saying also an albino, not just some random person?" He nodded slowly, as if I was only just beginning to understand now.
"An albino, Jimmy. White hair, white eyelashes, red eyes."
I swallowed. "Well, it's different now in our time. Everything's different now. DNA, databases, analyses, they'll check teeth. They'll find everything. These guys will handle it." Kevin snorted.
"And you think they were fools 100 years ago? Yeah, the tech wasn't the same, I'll grant you that. But their eyes were sharp, their memories keen, and they certainly wouldn't have missed something like this. And I remember the old-timers saying that in their youth, they also found someone like that. White as chalk, odd, like some unheard-of marvel, not a person. Throat, shredded, only they never identified anyone. Not 40 years ago, nor in my grandfather's youth. And now this is the third, like clockwork. You, Jimmy, look around. Where else in Australia are you going to find so many albinos? You can count them on one hand. They're all under observation, all in plain sight. But these ones, they're like they came out of nowhere, like someone's dumping them here. And at the mine, snip. Looks like we've got a once every 40 years special here. Catch and cut an albino's throat."
He paused, then chuckled.
"So you think about it, Jimmy. If you want to talk about it, come over after your shift. We'll sit down, have a cold tinny or two. And these blokes,"
he waved towards the city experts,
"you can forget about them. They won't investigate anything."
By midday, the work at the scene was complete. The city spooks ran around the perimeter with instruments, took fingerprints, and processed the hut thoroughly. Staff were interviewed, and so were the tourists. Hart took many photos. I told him I'd also taken footage and would send it if it could be useful. He thanked me, said he'd be in touch if he needed anything. I naturally drew my own conclusions. He nodded to McLean. "Let's load him up." The body was carefully sealed in a bag, carried past the hushed camp and loaded into the helicopter. The tourists watched, sullen-faced, as if they'd aged 10 years in a day. The chopper rose with a hum and disappeared behind the hills, leaving behind the smell of kerosene and a strange feeling as if none of it had ever happened. I exhaled, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and drove back to Leonora. The station was quiet and cool. I grabbed a can of Coke from the fridge and called the chief. He answered quickly. I reported today's incident. The chief was very concerned. He expressed hope that he could return this evening and would contact the department in Kalgoorlie, handling the case in the meantime. "Jimmy, you handled it well. See you tomorrow," the boss said. That cheered me up a bit. Outside, the air shimmered like glass under a blowtorch. The air conditioner hummed like a beehive. I opened news websites, then a forum for pathologists, where they sometimes posted strange case studies. I typed into the search bar, "Albino, unidentified, murdered, Australia." First, it showed reports on discrimination in Africa, then medical articles. All wrong. Either too old or too noisy. Sensational headlines, clickbait, urban legends. I checked a statistics website. Albinos, less than 0.01% of Australia's population. All accounted for, many belonging to communities. You can count them on one hand, Kevin's words surfaced in my mind. And damn it, he was right. A tab for the Forensics Forum blinked on the screen. I wasn't registered there, but I read the posts. I wanted to write, but didn't. They wouldn't believe me anyway. They'd just ask, "Who are you?" After my shift, I went home, finally washed off the sticky fatigue, and grabbing 2 six-packs of VB, drove to Kevin's place. He greeted me warmly, said he'd been expecting me. We settled on his cozy patio and opened a couple of cold ones. "So, Kevin, what are your thoughts on today's event? Why are you so sure the crime won't be solved?" Kevin laughed.
"I have a hunch our victim was a plant. Yeah, Jimmy, I see your surprise. It only hit me when our guys got to the scene and those pompous turkeys from Kalgoorlie flew in."
"What do you mean? Do you think he was killed somewhere else and then brought here, dumped in the hut?"
"Well, not quite. I reckon he was killed right here, but before that, he was planted here,"
Kevin said contentedly, taking a sip and watching me wince in confusion. "All right, Kevin, no more messing about. Just tell me straight, in order, as it happened. No riddles," I said. Kevin lit a cigarette.
"Tell me, James Murdock, Junior Constable, how old are you?"
"I'm 24, why?"
"I look at you, Jimmy, and I remember myself. I also wanted to be useful to society and chose a profession that seemed noble to me. But they just waved me off like an annoying gnat. Like, you're too young and foolish, it's none of your business."
I immediately remembered the awkward feeling I'd experienced that morning while talking to the experts from Kalgoorlie.
"Don't you fret, son. You'll show them up if you make good use of my hunches and information. They've got science and experience on their side, but you've got old Kevin, your neighbor, who's still got all his marbles and a clear head. We'll just see who comes out on top."
The old man burst out laughing. I stared at him, not knowing what to say. He opened another couple of tinnies for us and began,
"All right, Constable Murdock, let's play detectives. Old and young, as they say. A sharp young mind plus life experience sometimes work wonders. Who knows? We might just solve a crime sitting in the backyard with a cold beer."
He winked. Honestly, I felt greatly encouraged and was intrigued. "Kevin, you old bugger, don't keep me in suspense."
All right. Listen, until today, I hadn't thought about that story from 40 years ago. I was 24 then, just like you are now, and I'd been a firefighter for a year by that time. It was 1985, and that day, just like today, we were called to Gwalia to assist the police. The case was unprecedented. Not that murders didn't happen in our neck of the woods. All sorts of things did. But here, everyone was shocked by the brutality of the killing itself. The man's throat was cut in a way no decent owner would even treat livestock. On top of that, all the witnesses were astonished by the victim's appearance. Honestly, none of us had known about albinism before that. Maybe in bigger cities, it's not such a big oddity. But here, it was the first time we'd encountered such a phenomenon, as if we'd seen a pink elephant in the town square. You already know the history of our area without me telling you. The mine had by then been reopened 20 years after its closure. You remember, the mine closed in '63 and Gwalia died out. In '72, Gwalia was declared an open-air museum, and the stream of tourists eager to see the ghost town hasn't stopped since. When investors showed economic interest in this deepest mine in Australia in '83, it was reopened, but Gwalia remained a ghost town. There was no point in restoring it. Miners could be housed in Leonora. By then, transport allowed them to live away from the crater's edge and the round-the-clock roar of machinery. So, back to that day. Back then, they also called in specialists from Kalgoorlie. They were good blokes, thorough professionals. They spent about 2 weeks here studying everything carefully involving us firefighters in the cooperation. But the case went cold. Leonora was abuzz with chatter then, so many rumors. You know, people here love to gossip and make things up. And it only just hit me today, Jimmy. It was the same in '85. Then I remembered how, in my family circle, my grandfather, a miner, spoke of a similar case. But back then, in my youth, I didn't pay it any mind. Today I've been mulling it over all day and a pattern emerges. I distinctly remember my grandfather talking about the year 45. Look, Jimmy, what we've got. 45, 85, 2025. How about that? What do you say? Coincidence or a pattern?
Bullshit, Kevin. You think the investigation won't link these cases together? If you know, then surely there are clever folks who'll figure it out. In any case, they'll establish his identity. They couldn't do it in your youth for obvious reasons, let alone in 45 of last century. But now they'll definitely determine who this albino is and where he's from, I blurted out, confident that scientific progress would sort it out in no time.
You're not listening properly, Jimmy. It's not about science. It's about the fact that this science won't be able to establish this person's identity.
Then I'm a complete mug for continuing to believe in DNA analysis. So according to you, our victim's an alien? Come on, Kevin, I stopped believing in fairy tales a long time ago. Lay out your hypotheses, because to me, all of this sounds like rubbish, no offense.
I understand your confusion, Jimmy. Give me a little time, because the puzzle only started coming together for me today, and it's still not complete. But we've got plenty of beer, and I think we'll solve this riddle.
All right, mate. I've only got one thing clear so far. Every 40 years, someone nicks albinos in Gwalia. Previous investigations led nowhere, and you reckon this crime will also remain unsolved, even with the full power of advanced technology, right? Lay out your puzzle. We'll put it together.
So, in 1983, all of Leonora was experiencing an economic boom. Sons of Gwalia had reopened. People flocked here from all corners of the planet. The gold rush was on. My younger cousin, Mary Rowley, met a good bloke, Goodwin White, my age, young, strong, handsome. He captured her heart. They got married, and Mary became white. Everything was fine for them until 2000. By then, they had a son and a daughter when a tragic incident happened to Goodwin at the mine. He suffered a complex leg fracture with irreversible joint damage, leading to chronic lameness and loss of ability to work in the mine. Unfortunately, he became disabled and could no longer continue working underground.
All right, Kevin, I sympathize with Goodwin, of course, but many people in life lose their ability to work. As far as I know, he's a respected man, and he was the founder of the Hoover House Museum. Everyone knows that. Even though I was just a kid, I still remember the pomp with which the museum and hotel were opened in 2010. That gave a new boost to tourism in our region. Let's get to the point. What does your cousin and her husband have to do with any of this?
Jimmy, our Mary was a real princess to us, the only girl in the family. We always tried to help her family in every way we could. It was Mary who guided her husband towards the restoration of Hoover House, so that's her credit.
All right, Mary White is the inspirer and main driver behind the revival of our regional history. And what follows from that? Or are you just thinking out loud?
Goodwin managed to get the government to recognize Hoover House as a historical asset and received a grant for its restoration. It turned out that only our district was aware that the 31st U.S. President, Herbert Hoover, who founded our deepest mine in Australia, Sons of Gwalia, lived here. He wanted to commemorate this historical episode, and he did it. Hoover House was restored, but the grant wasn't enough, and Goodwin contributed an amount that gave him the right to be a co-owner. Our numerous relatives helped with the interior design. We went through our family albums, choosing photos to print and hang in frames in the lobby of the new hotel and museum. And that's when I was looking through Goodwin's album. One of the photos caught my eye. It showed Goodwin's family on a ranch in America where he grew up, surrounded by his numerous relatives. and among them was an elderly albino. I then asked Goodwin, "Who's that?" And Goodwin laughed and replied, "Well, what do you think? Where did I get the surname White? My founding grandfather was an albino." On opening day, we were all so happy for Mary and Goodwin that their hotel and museum had finally opened. There was a buzz, congratulations, and of course, a lot of drinking. We really had a few too many back then. I remember we went out for a smoke and I asked Goodwin, "Why didn't you hang that photo of your family? People would have been interested, just like us. You're American, and we, unfortunately, never saw your family. Why, by the way, did no one come?" Goodwin then said, "You know, Kevin, I respect you, but you'd better not grill me about my family. Not everything is so simple. And I don't want to chat about it, but so you don't ask me such questions again, I'll tell you. My albino grandfather is Hoover's son, period." Back then, I decided he was just drunk and somehow mad at me. I forgot about that conversation. But now, Jimmy, I think we should clarify the situation. Doesn't all this seem suspiciously strange to you?
If Goodwin's grandfather, the albino, was Hoover's son, that changes everything. Hoover House, the mine, these cyclical deaths of albinos, this isn't just a coincidence. This is a personal connection. Goodwin isn't just restoring the museum at his wife Mary's request. He has some personal interest. We need to look into the biographies of Herbert Hoover and Goodwin White.
Jimmy, you can get on all those Googles and Googlies. Look up Hoover's biography, his family. Maybe we missed something. Either our Goodwin White is spinning tales, or you and I don't know something. Get on some ChatGPT or whatever you young folks use these days and check, did Hoover have an albino son?
You know what, Kevin, I said. I highly doubt Google will answer such a question, let alone ChatGPT and other neural networks. They'll tell you a pack of lies and charge you nothing for it. We need to act differently here. Bob Williams, my classmate and also my best childhood friend. He was always the cleverest among us, and now he works in California at Google's main office in Mountain View. A cool developer, programmer. He's the one who can help us. If he can't get information of this kind, then I'm sure no one can, so all our hope is on him. I wrote down all the details about Goodwin White that Kevin could possibly know. He was born in Texas in '61, graduated from the Colorado School of Mines. Not much, but something. We finished our beer and I returned home. It was about 9 in the evening. In California, it was just beginning to be morning, around 6. It was inconvenient to call at that time. Bob was probably still asleep, and even if not, I didn't want to burden him with such information first thing in the morning. I tried asking questions to neural networks myself, but as I thought, it was unsuccessful. So I waited until it was about 9 in the morning for Bob, and then I dialed his number. I dumped the whole story of the day on him.
Whoa, Jimmy, you've really spun a yarn there. Sounds like the setup for some old Australian horror flick. I like it, I'm in. Send me a brief report on all the names, dates, and I swear to you, my pirate mate, we'll follow this map and dig up a treasure deeper than any gold vein in our mine.
The next day, my boss, Sergeant Brown, greeted me at work. Naturally, I gave him a detailed report on yesterday's case, keeping quiet about starting my own investigation. He praised me for the work I'd done and said he hoped the specialists from Kalgoorlie would solve the case, promising to keep me informed because he could see the impression the event had made on me. I needed someone who remembered and knew Leonora, someone who had seen everything with their own eyes and who knew the legends of our land. I headed to the home of Old Man Bill, the oldest Aboriginal elder in Leonora. His house stood forlornly on the far outskirts, where the dusty road stretched into the endless red expanses of the bush. Bill was reclusive. His wrinkled, weather-beaten face seemed to be a part of this ancient landscape itself. He spoke little, but every word he uttered weighed like a gold nugget. Bill was a keeper of forgotten stories. His words, sparse and rare, carried the weight of generations. "Good morning, Bill," I said, stopping at a respectful distance, feeling the smell of dry grass and smoke from barely smoldering embers.
"G'day, Jimmy, good to see you. What brings you here?"
The old grey-haired Aboriginal elder looked at me with a paternal squint. His eyes, faded by the sun, seemed bottomless. "I need your help, but it's not official." His gaze, usually calm, sharpened like a shard of glass, piercing right through me. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the chirping of cicadas.
Spit it out, Jimmy. How can I help you?
Are you aware of what happened here yesterday? I want to know what you think about it, what your legends tell you.
It's good to hear that young people are interested in Aboriginal legends.
Bill's raspy voice seemed to carry a hint of mockery.
Considering you said your visit isn't official, and not in your capacity as an officer, I can tell you a few things, and then you decide how to use Aboriginal stories.
Exactly, old man Bill, no reports. This is purely my own interest. I already know a bit, but it's not enough to have the full picture.
I understand, Jimmy. Now listen and don't interrupt. Our ancient dreams state, there is an old prophecy. It says that we must live in harmony, and whoever disturbs the course of nature will be swallowed by frost. Every 40 years, someone appeared who weighs, who balances things out. This is the ghost, white as bone. He comes from the east, from a place we call Nyungar. He takes souls, he takes light, if we have lived unrighteously. The place he comes from is the boundary of worlds, where things become thin, where our dreams intertwine with other worlds.
Bill raised a finger, pointing towards the mine. His hand, covered with gnarled veins and wrinkles, seemed an extension of the earth itself, a symbol of an unbreakable bond with the ancient history of these places.
We lived by the covenants for millennia, until pale people stepped onto this land, arriving in their huge boats, and began to drive us from our lands. When the strangers began to wound the earth with their iron tools, when their greed began to penetrate deeper than the roots of the oldest eucalyptus trees, harmony was disturbed. The mines roared, the earth cried, the white people didn't understand what they were doing, and the ghost, who carries out an audit every 40 years, suddenly became mortal.
Bill burst out laughing.
You've almost got it, my boy, haven't you?
Almost. Tell me, what do you know about 1905? Was there a similar story that year?
You're smart, Jimmy. 1905, you say? The earth was just beginning to groan from its wounds then. The pale people were just learning to tear out its heart. And the ghost? He misfired then. The pale people were clever and sly bastards. They made a deal with him. They promised him control over the portal and in return asked for control in other spheres.
And what deal did they ultimately strike? I waited impatiently for an answer, but understood I needed to be extremely polite if I wanted to coax all the information out of the old bugger.
Hoover made that deal. It's not for me to tell you who he is. He made a promise to the white ghost that his world would control ours every 40 years, as before, without disturbing the usual course. But in return, he demanded that he would control this entire world, a world where white people always dictate. The deal was sealed. His wife Lou bore a child from the ghost. Hoover became the president of the USA. That's the whole story, Jimmy. Simple, eh?
I'm well aware of Hoover's biography, and yesterday I refreshed my memory via Google. He had 2 sons. The firstborn was in 1903, the second in 1907. Are you claiming there was another child?
Yes, Jimmy. I am claiming that. A child conceived here in 1905 when Hoover came here again as a shareholder. It was his personal deal, and no Wikipedia will tell you that.
But that's crazy, Bill. Surely a person couldn't go that far.
Insatiable greed for power, Jimmy. Hoover was a rich man, but not enough to run for president. And then there was this option, guaranteeing an unconditional victory. Wouldn't you have taken advantage of it?
And what happened to the one he made the deal with?
After the deal was made, the albino returned to his world. What happened next? I see you've already dug up from other sources. As expected, he comes every 40 years, only to have his throat cut. And anyway, Jimmy, where's my beer? Do you have no respect for me?
Of course, Bill, I respect you, and of course I didn't come empty-handed. Here's your beer, and thanks for the history lesson, and also for the information about Herbert Hoover's family. I pulled a couple of 6-packs of VB from the car and handed them to a happy Bill. We shook hands and I drove off deep in thought about what I'd heard. A few days passed as usual. Nothing happened, even the flies were gone. Leonora plunged into a sleepy haze. Finally, Bob Williams got in touch.
Jimmy, I found something. But it's not just something, it's a complete clusterfuck.
Spill it, Bob. I'm ready for any shock content.
All right, listen. Just don't ask me where I got this info. A child was born into Hoover's family in 1906, but not an ordinary one, as you figured, but an albino. They meticulously hid this fact from the public. The child was given up for adoption to a foster family in Texas. The Hoover family secretly provided financial assistance to this family, and when the boy grew up, he received a substantial sum in a bank account. In all likelihood, they didn't hide his true parents from him. He took the surname White, Henry White. He lived a simple life, got married, bought a ranch, and raised cattle. He was quite prolific, had a bunch of children and grandchildren. By the way, his genes weren't passed on to any of his descendants. There were no more albinos in the family. He lived a very long and prosperous life. So our Goodwin White, whom we know well, is indeed a descendant of the Hoovers, but apparently not of Hoover himself, but of his wife, who got pregnant by God knows who in Leonora in 1905. Draw your own conclusions, bro. And that's not all. One of Henry White's sons, Clark White, visited Australia in 1945, and for some reason this very Clark went straight to Leonora. Probably a simple farmer from Texas suddenly got the urge to see our middle of nowhere. Not Sydney, not Melbourne, but specifically Leonora. I'm sure the tourist office recommended it. Furthermore, you're aware that in 1985, our Mr. White, the current caretaker of Hoover House, was already here. How about that, Elon Musk?
Bob, so what you're saying is this whole family is some kind of order of guardians. They're guarding this portal and preventing otherworldly beings from entering our world. But why? They're violating their deal agreements.
I don't know, Jimmy, why the White family took on such a role or what their goal is, but I stumbled upon something completely unexpected, on curious legends and beliefs among the peoples of sub-Saharan Africa. In this region, the birth rate of albinos is higher than the global average. People there believe that there is a certain founding father living beneath our world, from whom they originated, and he comes to their land once every half-century to check on how his descendants are living. That's why every half-century, there's a surge in the birth rate of people with albinism. Scientists suggest this is linked to the albinism gene, which is called the founder effect. In this same region, superstitions are widespread that sacrificing an albino cures poverty. Hence ritual killings, witch doctors' concoctions, potions, and brews made from albinos thrive, bringing wealth, luck, and healing from all diseases. So, the old-timers claim that the founding father was killed the last 3 times he came to visit this world, and his children in it. Therefore, he brought misfortunes upon the earth, like the inter-ethnic conflict in Rwanda between the Tutsi and Hutu, which led to the genocide of over 1 million people, and terrible epidemics of cholera and dysentery in Tanzania, Uganda, Burundi, and Zaire. The founding father is angry that his children are being harmed, because he himself cannot live in our world, as he is not adapted to life under the sun. So think about it, Jimmy. Maybe everything is much simpler than it seems. Maybe the White family actually believes that killing albinos brings them good luck, and that's where this wild ritual every 40 years comes from?
The conversation with Bob really opened my eyes to a lot. I needed to figure out what to do with this information. Not coming up with anything better, I grabbed some beer and headed back to that old bugger Bill. The cunning old fella was expecting me, knew I'd return, and was already looking forward to a cold one. We settled into his worn rattan chairs, opened a couple of tinnies, and I told the old man about the legends of Black Africa, their wild rituals, and asked Bill if he saw any identity with his Aboriginal legends. Bill agreed that there was a certain connection, with slight distortions, but overall it was similar. The only difference was that Aboriginal people don't have these wild beliefs and rituals, and they don't consider the white ghost to be the founding father of these lands, but merely one of the spirits who periodically enters this world and draws energy by fathering a child on this earth, in return protecting people from cataclysms and epidemics. This maintained the balance between worlds, but the pale people disrupted the harmony, and now, Jimmy, expect trouble. We'll soon suffer the same fate as Africa. We've also killed the white ghost 3 times now and haven't allowed him to leave offspring. He has no source of energy to protect this land, and you've already seen the beginnings of trouble. COVID was just the start. I asked Bill what to do, how to stop it, but the old man waved it off, saying it was too late to change anything, that the apocalypse was at the doorstep. My mind was racing. Bob, Kevin, Bill. Each of them had given me a piece of the puzzle that was now forming a monstrous picture. No cop in Kalgoorlie, No official from the department would listen to me. They'd just laugh in my face and call me crazy. I called Bob in California. I needed advice.
You've got one shot. This has to go global. I've got a couple of ideas of who we could leak it to. Joe Rogan, Candace Owens, or maybe Lex Fridman. They're all hungry for this kind of shit. Do you have real photos from the crime scene, Jimmy? That's the key. You send me everything you've got, and I'll make sure your name doesn't even come up. You'll stay in the shadows if you want. We'll just drop this bomb on the right people.
3 weeks passed, and Candace Owens, known for her fearlessness and ability to dig to the truth, announced her next big project.
You know how I feel about the Australian Department of Home Affairs, after Minister Tony Burke denied me a visa to the country. Well, it looks like I've got a story for you where we'll see some very strange immigration to Australia. Perhaps even from some parallel reality. I've got something for you that will make you question everything you thought you knew about tourism in Australia. Forget your boring history books. You're about to hear the truth. Get ready to delve into the dark secrets of the Australian bush. My next big piece will be called The Albino from Gwalia.
I watched this unfold from my sleepy Leonora and anticipated the satisfaction. I respect Candace's sharp mind, and I'm confident she'll get to the bottom of this. In any case, our law enforcement won't be able to sweep this story under the rug. She's brilliant. The albino from Gwalia is a fantastic idea.